The debt must always be paid. Commander Evan Martel watched the alien fleet resolve from shimmering temporal distortions into hard reality. They did not arrive with the clamor of war. There was no cascade of weapon ports opening, no surge of energy signatures that would have sent his own vessel, the human mandate ship Vindication, to high alert. The Cathar Ascendancy came in silence, their ships like polished obsidian daggers, aimed at the heart of the system. Their arrival was an act of law, not aggression. That was far worse. Below them, the planet Lyra spun in blissful ignorance, its pre-industrial civilization unaware of the judgment falling from their sky. Martel felt the familiar cold knot tighten in his gut, the one reserved for impossible choices. He stood on the command deck, a space of cool blues and soft, responsive light. The air was clean, recycled with the faint, sterile scent of ozone from the nearby tactical holotank. Around him, his crew moved with practiced efficiency, their murmurs a low thrum of controlled process. He could feel the slight vibration of the ship's inertial dampeners through the soles of his boots, a constant reminder of the power he commanded and the responsibility that came with it. The stakes were simple, a world's freedom. His path was not. This would not be a battle of cannons and shields, but of clauses and precedents, a fight to be held in a star court or a public inquiry. The Cathar did not conquer worlds. They foreclosed on them. Praetor Velox is hailing us, Commander Lieutenant Anya Sharma, his legal officer announced. Her voice was steady, but her dark eyes fixed on the main view screen held a flicker of deep concern. Standard Ascendancy greeting. They are broadcasting their writ of collection publicly. On screen, Martel ordered. His own voice was a low baritone designed to convey a calm he did not feel. The face that appeared was reptilian, yet unsettlingly refined. Praetor Velox had scales the color of old jade and eyes like chips of amber. There was no malice in its expression, only a profound, unshakable certainty. Commander Martel of the Human Mandate. The praetor's translated voice was smooth, like stones worn down by a patient river. You are trespassing in a designated collection zone. The Ascendancy is here to claim its lawful gratitude tithe from the inhabitants of the fourth planet. This is a matter of settled cosmic law. We trust you will not interfere. Martel's jaw tightened. The gratitude tithe, a benign name for generational servitude. Praetor the Lyra are a pre-contact species under mandate protection. They have no standing to enter into interstellar agreements. Your claim is invalid. A lie told for 1,000 years becomes a truth. The Cathar offered a slow, deliberate blink. Our claim predates your mandate. It predates this system's awareness of other life. We intervened 9 centuries ago, deflecting a coronal mass ejection that would have sterilized this world. We saved them. A debt was incurred. The alien's gaze was unwavering, its conviction absolute. And the debt must always be paid. A young Lyran artisan, her fur a mix of sun-bleached gold and shadow brown, hummed a traditional weaving song. She sat before her loom, her 3-fingered hands moving with a grace passed down through countless generations. Her workshop was open to the warm, fragrant air fitzer of the forest, filled with the scent of pollen and damp earth. Outside, her mate was teaching their youngest kit how to track sky lizards by the twitch of their iridescent wings. Their world was small, safe, and entirely their own. They had no word for debt beyond the simple exchange of goods. They had no concept of a price being placed upon their children's children. Solon, give me the calculus, Martel said, turning away from the screen as the Cathar transmission ended. He addressed the empty air, but his focus was on the faint, shimmering light that was the AI's core interface. The ship mind's voice, a blend of 1,000 human scholars, echoed softly from the bridge emitters. The Cathar fleet consists of 7 Praetor ships. Their kinetic barrier strength is rated at 4.2 times our own. Their energy projection capability is 6.8 times our own. A direct military engagement results in our destruction with a 99.98% certainty. The voice was devoid of emotion, a pure distillation of fact. Numbers do not bleed, Commander. And the 0.02%. Jax, his tactical officer, chimed in, his knuckles white where he gripped his console. That anomaly accounts for the Cathar Praetor spontaneously combusting due to an unforeseen metabolic failure, Solon replied dryly. It is not a tactical pathway. Anya Sharma stepped forward, her datapad glowing with legal statutes. Commander, their writ is solid, at least on the surface. They have sensor logs, energy dispersal readings, stellar charts from the period. They have a mountain of evidence showing they diverted a star-threatening event. Under the old accords, which the Ascendancy still reveres an act of salvation, can create an imposition of gratitude, especially on a non-signatory species. Imposition of gratitude. Martel repeated the words, their taste like ash in his mouth. They mean slavery, Anya. A tithe of population and resources forever. Their legal framework calls it a perpetual service obligation, she corrected, though her tone made her opinion clear. They see it as a fair exchange. Their argument is that without their intervention, there would be no Lyra to protect. They believe they own the very possibility of their existence. Their law was a weapon shaped to break the will. Martel looked from Anya's troubled face to the cold, logical display of the tactical holo. He saw the Cathar ships represented as serene, untouchable icons of power. He saw the gentle blue sphere of Lyra utterly defenseless. He was outgunned, outmaneuvered, and trapped in a legal cage built 9 centuries before humanity even reached for the stars. But humanity had learned a thing or two about cages. It had learned that the strongest bars were often the ones you couldn't see. Solon Martel said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Begin a deep dive into the Ascendancy's legal precedents. I want every case involving the gratitude tithe from the last 5,000 years. Cross-reference it with their ship movements, their economic records. Look for discrepancies. Look for patterns. Already underway, Commander, the AI responded. I have allocated 34% of my cognitive resources to the task. Initial analysis suggests the Cathar have successfully levied this tithe on 17 separate civilizations, 17 worlds. Martel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the bridge's climate control. He imagined 17 species shackled by a debt they never agreed to paying for a salvation they likely never understood. A debt cannot be owed by the unborn. He would not allow the Lyra to be the 18th. They're so confident, Anya said, using his first name in a rare breach of protocol. They're not just broadcasting their writ to us. They're broadcasting it to the entire sector. They're daring us to challenge them. Then we'll give them the challenge they want. Martel said, his gaze fixed on the image of the Praetor's impassive face. But not in the dark. We'll do it in the light. He turned to her, a new hard glint in his eye. Anya, find me a path. Find me a way to compel them into a public inquiry. A forum where their methods can be seen by everyone. The corridor of law. She breathed, her eyes widening. It's an archaic protocol rarely invoked. It forces binding arbitration before a quorum of neutral witnesses. It's incredibly risky. If we lose, their claim is not just validated, it becomes permanently enshrined. We would be legally obligated to help them enforce it. A ruling in their favor would be a cage for us all. What are the criteria for invocation? Martel pressed. A clear and present dispute over foundational law involving a non-signatory species Where one party claims protectorate status, she recited the words flowing from memory. And there must be a tangible risk of catastrophic escalation. We fit, Commander. We fit perfectly. They will accept, Solon stated calmly. My projections on Cathar psychology indicate a cultural imperative towards demonstrating legal and moral superiority. They will perceive a refusal as a sign of weakness in their claim. Their arrogance is their primary vulnerability. Good Martel said, a sliver of a predatory smile touching his lips. Let their arrogance be the stone upon which they stumble. He looked back at the view screen at the silent, waiting ships. The game was set. Not a war of weapons, but a war of words, of truths and lies, of debts and freedoms. And the first casualty would be silence. The Cathar did not wait. As if sensing the shift in human strategy, their ships began to move. One of the smaller vessels broke formation and began a slow, deliberate descent toward Lyra's upper atmosphere. It wasn't an attack. It was an assertion of ownership. A surveyor ship sent to begin cataloging the assets that were now in their eyes, theirs to claim. The air on the Vindication's bridge grew thick with tension. Jax's hand hovered over the weapons console, his gaze locked on Martel, waiting for the order that could start a war. Hold your fire, Lieutenant Martel commanded, his voice a steel whip. Let them posture. Solon, record everything. Every scan, every atmospheric displacement. Log it as a violation of the Mandate Protectorate Treaty Article 4, Section 2, unsolicited observation of a protected world. Logged, Commander, the AI confirmed. I am also compiling a list of potential neutral arbiters for the inquiry quorum. The criteria favor species with long-standing legal traditions and no prior conflicts with either humanity or the Cathar ascendancy. A mirror held up to the law must be flawless. Martel nodded, his mind already racing ahead. The inquiry was their only chance, a desperate gambit played on a stage as wide as the galaxy. He had to prove that the Cathar's claim, built on a foundation of apparent benevolence, was nothing more than a predatory contract written in invisible ink. He needed to find the flaw in their perfect 900-year-old story. Anya, he said, turning to his legal officer. The Cathar claim is based on an act of salvation. What if it wasn't a salvation? What if it was just business? Sharma frowned, considering the angle. You mean they caused the event themselves? There's no evidence of that. Their technology then was formidable, but star tampering on that scale. No, not that, Martel mused, pacing the command deck. The soft light from the floor panels traced his restless steps. I mean the cost. They intervened. What did it cost them? What resources did they expend? There is no such thing as a free rescue, not on this scale. They had to have paid a price. The ledger always balances. I am accessing their public economic archives from that century, Solon interjected. It is a dense data set, but Cathar accounting is meticulous. They are a culture obsessed with balancing accounts. Every expenditure of energy, every unit of fuel, every crew hour is documented. Find it, Solon, Martel urged. Find the receipt for Lyra's salvation. I want to know the exact price they paid. A new mystery began to form in Martel's mind. The Cathar were not hiding their actions. They were proud of them. They broadcast their writ as a matter of public record. Their confidence was absolute. Why was it simply faith in their ancient laws? Or was there something else, something they believed made their claim unimpeachable? The first report from Solon's deep dive came hours later. It was not a flaw in the Cathar's legal argument, but something far more insidious. It was a detail buried in the appendices of their tithe collections on other worlds. A recurring line item listed under compliance and integration. The term was collars of fealty. What are they? Martel asked. His eyes narrowed at the text on the main screen. I am accessing restricted databases, Solon's voice was a low hum of processing power. Information is limited. They are described as ceremonial artifacts bestowed upon the tithed population, a symbol of their enduring gratitude and their sacred obligation to the ascendancy. A symbol, Jax snorted from the tactical station. Sounds more like a leash. Never trust a law that requires a physical shackle. Continue digging, Solon Martel commanded. Cross-reference medical records, social structures of the tithed worlds. I want to know what those collars actually do. The Cathar surveyor ship completed its initial pass and ascended back to its fleet, a silent, smug declaration of its right to be there. They hadn't fired a shot. They hadn't hailed a single Lyran. They had simply watched, measured, and recorded. The violation felt deeper than any physical attack. It was the cold, calculating gaze of a predator assessing its prey. Then came the formal invocation. Anya Sharma. Her face pale but her voice resonating with formal power broadcast the summons. She cited the ancient interstellar protocols, the risk of escalation, and the foundational legal dispute. She called for a corridor of law, a public inquiry, to be held before a neutral quorum. She named the time, the place, a neutral point in the system, equidistant from both fleets and the terms. The vindication had thrown down the gauntlet. The Cathar's response was swift. Praetor Vlox appeared on screen again, its amber eyes gleaming with something that might have been amusement. The human mandate invokes the corridor. A quaint, antiquated tradition. You believe your arguments have merit. You believe your interpretation of the law can outweigh 9 centuries of established precedent. Very well. The Cathar ascendancy accepts your challenge. Let the galaxy watch as your empty moralizing crumbles before the weight of truth. Let them see what happens when a debt is left unpaid. The truth is a mountain. You cannot vote it away. The connection cut. A wave of grim determination washed over the bridge. There was no going back. They had forced the confrontation into the open, and now they had to win it. They accepted. Jax breathed a hint of disbelief in his voice. Just like Solon said they would. Arrogance is a powerful opiate, Martel murmured. He turned to his legal officer. Anya, prepare the opening statement. Focus on the principle of consent. The Lyra could not consent to a contract they were unaware of. They cannot be bound by a debt incurred on their behalf without their knowledge. It's a strong ethical argument, Commander, she agreed, but Cathar law is notoriously unsentimental. They will argue that the consent of a drowning man is not required to save his life. They will say the act of salvation itself creates the obligation. Then we attack the act itself, Martel countered his mind, locking onto the thread he'd found earlier. Solon, any progress on the cost analysis? Yes, Commander, the AI replied. I have isolated the relevant records. The Cathar fleet assigned to the Lyra system 9 centuries ago was the 3rd expansionary cohort. Their mission logs detail the operation. They expended a significant amount of energy to project a gravimetric shear, altering the trajectory of the coronal mass ejection. The AI paused a calculated dramatic beat. I have quantified the total energy expenditure, the resource cost of the fuel consumed, and the amortized value of the ship deployment. A data slate lit up on the main screen filled with figures and complex equations. It was a detailed invoice for the saving of a world. A cost is a fact, not an opinion. It's a lot, Jax whistled, looking at the numbers. But it is finite, Martel said, a spark of understanding igniting in his eyes. It is a specific, calculable amount. It is not infinite. It does not justify a perpetual claim. This was the first real crack in the Cathar's legal armor. Their claim was for eternity, a tithe levied on every generation to come. But the act they based it on had a definite cost. It was a single entry in a very old ledger. How could a finite cost justify an infinite debt? It was a logical and mathematical fallacy, and the Cathar, for all their legal maneuvering, were a race that prided themselves on logic. "This is our angle," Martel declared, his voice ringing with newfound confidence. "We are not going to argue about their right to be compensated. We are going to argue about the amount. We will turn their own meticulous record-keeping against them." Commander Solon's voice cut through the burgeoning optimism. "There is another factor. I have finished my analysis of the collars of fealty." The AI's tone for the first time carried a ghost of something heavy, something akin to distaste. "They are not ceremonial. They are neurological regulators. Each collar contains a micropositronic processor that interfaces with the wearer's nervous system." A cold dread settled back over the bridge. "What do they regulate?" Anya asked, her voice barely a whisper. "They suppress specific neurotransmitters associated with rebellion, dissent, and long-range creative planning," Solon explained. "They also induce a mild, persistent sense of obligation and contentment. They do not merely enforce compliance, they engineer it. The collars are passed from parent to child. The effect is cumulative across generations. A cage for the mind is the final prison." The full monstrous picture snapped into focus. The Cathar didn't just tithe bodies and resources. They tithed the very spirit of a people. They didn't just enslave them. They edited their minds until they were grateful for the chains. This was why the Cathar were so confident. There was no record of rebellion from any of the 17 tithed worlds because it was physically and neurologically impossible for them to rebel. Their law wasn't just written in books. It was written into the brains of their subjects. A Lyran elder, his fur the color of snow, and his eyes the deep, cloudy blue of a twilight sky, sat with his council beneath the boughs of a 1,000-year-old wisdom tree. The tree's leaves, which chimed softly in the breeze, were their planet's living library. They had received a simple pictographic message from the strange kind, star visitors, the humans. It spoke of a danger of a claim made by others. It asked for their story, for their history. The elder closed his eyes, reaching back through the oral traditions, through the songs and the weavings. There was no memory of a great fire in the sky. There was no tale of a salvation from the heavens. Their history was a slow, unbroken thread, stretching back into the mists of time. Their world had never almost died. The revelation about the collars changed everything. It transformed the legal battle into a moral crusade. This wasn't just about saving the Lyra. It was about exposing the rot at the heart of the Cathar ascendancy. This was Martel's second major escalation point. The plan was no longer just to dispute the debt. The plan was to put the very soul of Cathar law on trial. The nature of the crime is written in the tools of the criminal. "The inquiry begins in 12 hours, Martel announced, his voice hard as diamond. "Anya, rewrite the opening. We lead with the collars. We make this about what they do to people, not about what they are owed. Frame their gratitude tithe as the neurological larceny it is. They will object," Anya warned. "They will claim it's irrelevant to the core matter of the debt." "Let them," Martel shot back. "Let the quorum of witnesses see them argue that the tools of enslavement are irrelevant. Let's see how that plays on a public broadcast." The hours leading up to the inquiry were a blur of frantic preparation. The Vindication moved to the designated coordinates, a point in space where the system's primary star was a brilliant, impartial eye. The Cathar fleet mirrored their movement. their obsidian ships arranging themselves in a precise, intimidating formation. 3 ships from neutral species, a crystalline vessel of the Glypt, a biological ship organism of the Cetacine order, and a shimmering, formless energy cloud that was the Weaver consensus arrived to form the quorum. The stage was set. A shimmering, ethereal space was generated between the fleets, the corridor of law. It was a neutral ground of hard light and stabilized reality, a courtroom woven from the fabric of space-time. Projections of the participants would appear there, their words recorded, their arguments weighed, their every nuance broadcast for all to see. Commander Yvonne Martel stood on a designated platform on his own bridge, but his image, crisp and clear, materialized within the corridor. He wore his dress uniform, the deep blue fabric accented with the silver emblem of the mandate. He looked calm, composed, a pillar of human resolve. Across from him, the projection of Praetor Velox materialized, its jade-green scales seeming to absorb the light, its amber eyes holding a deep, ancient confidence. The 3 members of the quorum were arrayed between them, their forms alien and impassive. A universe was watching. The Glypt arbiter spoke first, its voice a series of resonant chimes. This inquiry is convened. The Cathar ascendancy will present its claim first. The human mandate will then present its rebuttal. The verdict of this quorum will be final and binding. Begin. Praetor Velox inclined its head, a gesture of respect to the ancient process. Honored arbiters, it began, its voice smooth and reasonable. Our case is simple. 900 standard years ago, the star of this system produced a Class 7 coronal ejection. Unchecked, it would have scoured all life from the 4th planet. Our fleet, at great cost and risk to itself, intervened. We saved this world from utter annihilation. Holographic projections flared into existence around the Praetor. Star charts, energy readings, simulations of the planet burning under the star's fire. The evidence was compelling, visually powerful. We did not ask for this burden. We did not create the threat. We acted out of a sense of cosmic responsibility. But such an act is not without cost. The law, as old as the stars themselves, acknowledges that a life saved incurs a debt of gratitude. We are here merely to collect on that long overdue debt. A small tithe, a perpetual token of their existence, which is a gift from us. The simplest stories are the hardest to refute. The Praetor presented its case with masterful skill. It was a narrative of heroism, of sacrifice, of a patient, benevolent creditor finally coming to collect a just fee. It did not mention the callers. It did not mention the 17 other worlds. It presented its claim as a single, isolated, and profoundly reasonable act. When it finished, a palpable sense of conviction hung in the ethereal air of the corridor. The Cathar's case was on its surface flawless. Then it was Martel's turn. He stepped forward, his human form seeming small and fragile compared to the ancient reptilian Praetor. He did not begin with legal arguments or stellar charts. He began with a question. Praetor Velox, you speak of a token of gratitude, a small tithe. Could you please describe for this inquiry the specific form this tithe takes on the other worlds you have saved? The Praetor hesitated for a fraction of a second, the first break in its perfect composure. The tithe is customized to the capacity of the species. Resources labor, a symbolic gesture of fealty. It is a standard procedure. Symbolic gestures, Martel repeated, letting the words hang in the air. Praetor, does this symbolism include the bestowing of a ceremonial artifact known as a collar of fealty? There is no power in a truth until it is spoken aloud. The amber eyes of Velox narrowed. The collars are a gift. They help our wards to maintain a state of harmonious gratitude. They are not relevant to the legitimacy of the debt itself. I believe they are the most relevant fact of all, Martel countered, his voice rising in strength. Because they are not gifts. They are engines of control. They are neurological shackles designed to strip a species of its will, its descent, its very soul. They manufacture gratitude where none would naturally exist. He turned his gaze to the arbiters. The Cathar claim a debt of gratitude, but their entire system of collection is built on the admission that this gratitude is not freely given. It must be chemically and electronically enforced. He signaled to Solon. A new projection appeared beside him. It was a medical schematic, a detailed neurological map of a sentient being. Red lights pulsed where the collar's influence would take hold, silencing entire regions of the brain. This is not collection, Martel declared, his voice ringing with cold fury. This is a mutilation of the spirit, a lobotomy performed on a planetary scale. A debt paid by a slave is not a payment. It is theft. The Cetacine arbiter, a vast whale-like consciousness, let out a low, mournful tone that vibrated through the corridor. The Weaver consensus shimmered its energy field, shifting from a placid blue to a troubled violet. The Cathar's perfect legal argument had just been dragged into the mud of their monstrous methods. Praetor Vlox held up a three-fingered hand. The commander's emotional display is noted. However, the methods of collection are separate from the validity of the initial claim. Whether the Lyra pay with a song or with a collar, the debt remains. You have not refuted the core of our case. We saved their world. They owe us. Do they? Martel shot back, pressing his advantage. Did you save them from a random act of nature? Or did you save them from a fire you yourselves helped to set? A stunned silence fell. The praetor's jaw opened slightly. That is an outrageous and baseless accusation. Is it? Martel said, his gaze locked with the Cathar's. Solon, please display the energy expenditure logs for the Cathar's third expansionary cohort for the year prior to the Lyra event. A new screen of data appeared. Now cross-reference those logs with stellar activity in the surrounding 5 sectors. Lines of light connected the Cathar fleet's movements with faint, almost unnoticeable energy spikes in nearby uninhabited star systems. My ship mind has analyzed 9 centuries of your public records, Praetor Martel said, his voice cold and precise. And it has found a pattern. Before every salvation event, a Cathar fleet is present in a nearby system. There they engage in what their logs call gravimetric resonance testing. In layman's terms, they practice making stars unstable. They learned how to aim solar flares like a weapon. The greatest lie is a carefully framed truth. The air in the corridor crackled with energy. The arbiters leaned forward. The praetor was for the first time utterly speechless. Martel had not just questioned the Cathar's methods, he had just accused them of being the most successful and patient protection racket in the history of the galaxy. He wasn't done. You didn't just happen to be in the right place at the right time, praetor. You created the crisis you so heroically solved. The debt is invalid because it was manufactured through fraud. He paused, letting the weight of the accusation settle. Now Martel continued, his voice dropping, drawing every witness into his next words. Let's talk about the true cost of this salvation. He gestured to Solon, who brought up the final piece of evidence for the first phase of the inquiry. It was a single, detailed accounting ledger. Let's examine the bill. The ledger Solon displayed was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. It was not a single number, but a cascade of interconnected data points. The cost of the refined singularity fuel used to power the gravimetric projector. The precise energy wattage measured in terajoules of the shear wave itself. Even the calculated metabolic cost for the Cathar crew during the 37 hours of the operation cross-referenced with their species' standard caloric intake. It was an invoice so detailed, so exact, that it was a work of art. An art of pure, cold fact. According to your own records, Praetor Martell said, his voice calm and clear, the total quantifiable cost of your intervention was 1.7 trillion standard energy credits adjusted for 9 centuries of inflation. He let the number settle in the silent corridor. It was a vast sum, but it was not an infinite one. The human mandate on behalf of the protected world of Lyra hereby offers to pay this debt in full. Right now. A price once paid cannot be demanded again. This was the pivot. The moment the entire legal battle shifted on its axis. Martell wasn't just refuting the debt. He was calling their bluff by offering to settle it. He was taking their argument that they were owed for a service rendered and treating it with the literal transactional respect they claimed it deserved. He could feel Anya's shock through the command link, the sudden sharp intake of breath. This was not the strategy they had discussed. This was a move born of the moment, a blade forged in the heat of the inquiry. Praetor Vlox stared, its reptilian features frozen in a mask of disbelief. Its carefully constructed narrative of perpetual sacred obligation was being reduced to a simple commercial transaction. This is an insult. Vlox hissed, the smooth voice finally cracking. The debt is not one of credits and jewels. It is a debt of existence. It is a moral weight that can never be fully repaid. It can only be serviced eternally through gratitude. So your claim has no monetary value? Martell pressed, feigning confusion. Then it cannot be a debt. It is merely a sentiment. And sentiment cannot be enforced by law. He turned to the arbiters. The praetor is arguing that the Lyra owe them something beyond measure. Yet the action that created this supposed debt was entirely measurable. You cannot have it both ways. Either there is a price and we will pay it, or there is no price and there is no debt. The law must be a scale, not a poem. The glipped arbiter chimed softly a questioning note. The Cetacene's low song shifted in pitch. Martell's gambit had caught them all off guard. He had taken the Cathar's lofty philosophical claim and nailed it to the mundane, inescapable logic of a balance sheet. The Cathar could not accept the payment, because to do so would be to admit their eternal tithe was a fraud. But to refuse the payment was to admit their claim was not a true debt at all. It was a perfect legal trap. The commander of the Vindication is playing word games, Vlox snarled, recovering its composure. He attempts to distract from his slanderous, unsubstantiated accusations of fraud. We will not be drawn into this financial theater. We will return to the matter at hand, the mandate's baseless and defamatory allegations for which we will seek separate and severe sanction. A new threat. Vlox was escalating, shifting the battlefield from its claim on Lyra to an attack on the mandate itself. A charge of public defamation, if it stuck, could result in crippling trade restrictions and a formal censure that would undermine human authority for decades. The stakes had just risen again. Anya's voice came through his private comm, tight with worry. Commander, he's serious. If we can't prove the fraud conclusively, they could ruin us. The quorum would have to rule against us on that charge. Understood, Lieutenant Martell said calmly, his outward demeanor unchanged. He knew the risks, but he also knew the Cathar. Their greatest strength, their rigid adherence to law and logic, was also their greatest weakness. They built their cage of rules. They would die in it. We will happily address the charge of defamation, Praetor Martell announced in the open corridor. We will provide our proof. But first, the matter of the debt must be settled. The offer stands. A full and final settlement of 1.7 trillion credits. He held the Cathar's gaze. Refuse it, and you prove to this quorum that your claim was never about justice, but about perpetual domination. A pair of Lyran kits, their fur mottled like the forest floor, chased a glowing flutterfly through a clearing. They tumbled and wrestled, their high-pitched chirps echoing in the warm air. The concept of a court among the stars was as alien to them as the idea of a sky without a sun. Yet their future, the future of their children, and all the generations to come was being decided in that invisible space above their heads. They were the prize in a war of ideas, their freedom the ultimate stake. Back on the Vindication, the bridge was a tomb of silent tension. Every officer was watching the inquiry, their faces illuminated by the light of their consoles. Solon Martel sub-vocalized his public expression, a mask of calm deliberation. Begin Phase 2. Prepare the energy transfer, but route it through their public accounting network. I want every Cathar citizen with a datapad to get a receipt. The required protocols are archaic, Commander Solon's voice murmured in his ear. Designed for emergency resource sharing. Using them to force an unsolicited financial settlement is unprecedented. Their system may classify it as a hostile act. A new path is often mistaken for an attack. Their laws of commerce are as old as their laws of gratitude, Solon Martel replied. An authenticated transfer from a recognized sovereign power to settle a publicly declared debt is not a hostile act. It is an act of unimpeachable legal compliance. Find the loophole. Use their own system against them. There is a 4.2% chance their network will interpret the data packet as malware triggering a fleet-wide firewall cascade, Solon calculated, and a 95.8% chance it forces them to acknowledge the payment, Martel countered. I'll take those odds. Execute. In the corridor of law, Praetor Velox was backed into a corner, and it came out fighting. The human mandate's offer is a mockery, a stunt. We do not recognize it. We hereby formally reject this crude attempt to trivialize a sacred obligation. The words were firm, resolute, but they were exactly the words Martel needed to hear. The rejection is noted. Martel said, a flicker of triumph in his eyes. He made a subtle hand gesture, a prearranged signal to Jax at the tactical station. The Cathar ascendancy has now before this quorum, and the watching galaxy refused a good-faith offer to settle the very debt they claim is owed. They have demonstrated that their goal is not repayment. It is subjugation. Then everything happened at once. A thin, brilliant beam, boom of pure energy, shimmering with encoded data, lanced out from the Vindication. It was not a weapon. It was a broadcast aimed not at the Cathar ships' hulls, but at their primary communication arrays. It was the 1.7 trillion credits transferred in a single massive burst of energy and information. It was a mirror held up to their greed, reflecting their own price back at them. The debt is paid. On the bridge of the Cathar flagship, alarms blared. A junior officer cried out, "Praetor, we are receiving a massive energy transfer. It's a payment. It's registering on the public ledger, Praetor." Velox's head snapped toward the officer, its amber eyes wide with fury. "Impossible! Block it! Reject the transfer! We can't, sir!" The officer stammered, its claws scrabbling at the console. "It's using an ancestral commerce protocol. It's a registered settlement for a declared writ of collection. Our own network is authenticating it. It's confirmed. The debt is logged as paid in full. Across the entire Cathar ascendancy on countless worlds and ships, a public notification appeared. A transaction record stark and undeniable. The Lyran Gratitude Tithe Writ, 34 Alpha, had been settled. The account was closed. In the corridor, a stunned silence reigned. The arbiters stared, their alien minds processing the sheer audacity of the human maneuver. Martel had not waited for their permission. He had simply paid the bill. He had used the Cathar's own meticulous, unblinking system of accounting to bypass their authority and settle the matter directly. It was a breathtaking act of legal jujitsu. Justice is a verb. Praetor Velox trembled with rage. Its legal case, so carefully constructed over 9 centuries, had evaporated in a beam of light. Its claim was nullified. The writ was void. This is a trick, an illegal manipulation of our financial systems. This inquiry is a sham. It roared, its voice losing all its cultivated smoothness. The debt of gratitude cannot be paid with energy. It must be paid with fealty. We will take what we are owed. The praetor's projection vanished. Back in the real world, its flagship began to move. Weapon ports dormant for the entire encounter slid open with menacing slowness. The Cathar were abandoning the law. They were resorting to force. This was the final, desperate escalation, Commander. Jax yelled from tactical. They're powering weapons. They're moving on Lyra. He's breaking the sanctity of the corridor. Anya said, her voice a shocked whisper. He's invalidating the entire inquiry. He's gone rogue. He has lost the argument, so he seeks to win the battle. Martel said, his voice grim. But he has forgotten one thing. He turned to the main view screen where the Cathar fleet was beginning its descent. Solon, did the data packet arrive with the payment? Affirmatively, Commander, the AI replied. The complete unredacted evidence of their centuries-long fraud, including the stellar resonance data and the full neurological impact analysis of the fealty callers, was embedded within the transfer protocol. It was delivered not as a hostile file, but as the terms and conditions attachment to the payment. Every Cathar ship and the Ascendancy's Central Records Archive has just received and auto-archived the proof of their own high-level corruption. A truth cannot be unlearned. On the Cathar command ship, Praetor Velox was shouting orders, its voice hoarse with fury. Target the planet's primary energy sources. Prepare a demonstration of our resolve. But his crew was not responding. The junior officers and the ship captains were staring at their own data screens, at the damning evidence that had just appeared on their internal trusted network. They saw the star charts, the secret tests, the cold, hard proof that their entire culture's sacred mission was a lie. They were not saviors. They were predators. They were not collectors of a just debt. They were the galaxy's most patient criminals. The commander of the second Cathar ship, a veteran captain named Cavrel, opened a fleet-wide channel. Praetor Velox, his voice was heavy with disillusionment. I have reviewed the humans' data. The ledger does not lie. Our claim was based on a deception. Mutiny, Captain Cavrel Velox screeched. You will be stripped of your rank. You will be collared yourself. No, Praetor. Cavrel replied, his voice solid as rock. This is not mutiny. This is an adherence to the law, the true law, the one that says a debt built on a lie is no debt at all. One by one, the other 6 Cathar ships broke formation, moving to surround Velox's flagship. Their weapon ports were not aimed at the Vindication or Lyra. They were aimed at their own commander. Their own law had turned on them. The Praetor's ship stopped dead in space, caught in a net of its own making. The attempted violence had collapsed before it even began, defeated, not by human weapons, but by Cathar conscience awakened by a single, irrefutable truth. The corridor of law reappeared, though Velox was absent. The glipped arbiter chimed its tone, one of finality. The evidence is conclusive. The Cathar Ascendancy's claim is rejected. It is found to be based on systemic multi-generational fraud. The Weaver consensus pulsed with a cold white light. Furthermore, the use of neurological regulation devices, such as the collars of fealty, to enforce compliance, is hereby declared a crime against sentient sovereignty. Their use is outlawed in this sector, effective immediately. The Cetacine Arbiter sang a long final note of judgment. The human mandate's charge of defamation is dismissed. Their actions are vindicated. The Cathar Ascendancy will pay reparations to the 17 species previously subjected to the gratitude tithe. This ruling is final. The mirror showed them their true face, and it was hideous. The judgment was broadcast. The corridor faded. The case was closed. On the bridge of the vindication, a wave of exhausted relief washed over the crew. They had won. They had not fired a single shot, but they had achieved a total victory. It was a win for the Lyra, for the 17 other worlds, for the rule of law itself. But it had come at a cost. Commander Jax reported from his station, his voice subdued. That energy transfer took 82% of our operational reserves. We're running on fumes. It will be a long, slow journey home. The ship was vulnerable, its strength spent not on weapons, but on paying a debt that was never truly owed. It was a price they had willingly paid. Furthermore, Commander Solon added, by forcing this public ruling, we have made the mandate a declared enemy of any civilization employing similar methods of subjugation. Our threat profile has increased by 37.4%. They had won the battle, but in doing so had painted a target on their backs for future wars. Victory was never free. Martel looked at the view screen. The renegade Cathar flagship was being escorted away by its own fleet, its authority broken, its commander facing the cold justice of his own people. He looked at the blue globe of Lyra spinning peacefully, its people safe, their future, their own once more. This was what they fought for. This fleet, this saint ship, teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. A final message appeared on the main screen. It was a public ledger entry, blinking with the cold, immutable light of established law. Interstellar Arbitration Ruling 77.9. Alpha, the practice known as gratitude tithe, is permanently revoked. All existing obligations are declared null and void. The use of neurological enforcement is prohibited. Precedent locked. The ledger entry blinked once more, then settled, becoming a permanent part of galactic law. The mirror arrays on the quorum ships which had helped sustain the corridor dimmed as their purpose was fulfilled. Martel stood alone on the bridge as his crew began the quiet professional work of preparing for the long trip home. He had stared into the abyss of a perfect, monstrous legal system and had not flinched. He had held a mirror up to an empire, forcing it to confront the truth it had buried for centuries. Justice was not about vengeance or destruction. It was about balance. It was about returning the cost, making the ledger whole, and ensuring the debt was finally truly paid by those who had imposed it. Freedom isn't a gift, it's a receipt for a debt paid in full.